Roman Dmitri, the eldest son of Lord Dmitri. Roman's father was a famous blacksmith of the Cairo kingdom. The equipment he made was all top-notch. And when the war broke out, Roman's father became the main supplier of weapons for the country, contributing significantly to the victory. After the war ended, he was awarded the title of Baron for his contributions, and later became the lord of this land. Lord Dmitri had several sons, and Roman was the most unsuccessful, unintelligent, dissolute, and even secretly called the fool of the Dmitri family by his servants. Roman lived a miserable 25 years in this world, before Bak Jung-hyuk, a martial arts expert, transmigrated into that body. After waking up in a new body, the first thing Bak Jung-hyuk did, now it should be called Roman doing, is asking his servant to take him to the house of the oldest person in this land. Here, he heard the old man really about his father's heroic life, although the servant didn't know why the young master suddenly made such an unreasonable request. But after all, he was a servant, and a loyal servant had to complete his own mission. After listening to the story for a while, Roman had a rough understanding of his current identity. He didn't know why he was reincarnated. Perhaps this was the wish of the heavens, or it could also be the punishment of the gods because he didn't agree to ascend. But anyway, if he had been reborn, he had to live properly for another life. Just thinking about this, Roman suddenly heard a loud shout from the market a few steps away. This dog, a skinny young man with red hair, was being poked by a guy, broken and beaten to the point of being unrecognizable. While beating, he kept cursing, his face close to his. Passersby were extremely scared, and absolutely no one dared to stand up and stop him. Roman's servant saw the commotion and ran over to see first. But when he saw the sharp fang tattoo on the shoulder of the guy with the head, he seemed hesitant. What's going on here? Roman also followed him to gossip. Young master here has a liar. It seems to be someone from the Blood Fang gang. With the client's few memories, Roman had absolutely no impression of this name. According to his servant, they are an organization for heavy-handedness. The scope of Blood Fang gang's activities is not only limited to the territory of the Dmitri family but also in the surrounding areas. It seems that the red-haired young man owed him a large sum of money. That's why he was beaten up so much. Let's pretend we didn't see anything. It won't be good if we interfere, Roman's servant said softly, but when he turned around, his young master was nowhere to be seen. True to the familiar scene, Roman stood up and shouted loudly, causing the servants to panic. The Blood Fangs, upon seeing his appearance, immediately recognized him as the youngest young master of the Lord's house. But they weren't afraid at all, and even burst out laughing. Wow, since they're nobles, they dare to interfere in the flag, and even said some harsh words. The noble Dmitri here can go away, because this is our private matter. Obviously, even though Roman is the Lord's son, these bastards do not respect him, not even a little bit. The servant quickly advised Roman to go back, because the Blood Fang gang is a vicious bunch. However, with the blood of a martial arts expert boiling in his veins, how could Roman ignore this injustice? Hans, he suddenly spoke up, I still don't understand much about the rules here. So you explain, who is the one breaking the rules here? And what punishment will they receive? Hans was the name of that servant. Before the young master's question, he seemed quite confused, although Roman has never been very smart. But today, after a good night's sleep, it seems like he has completely lost his memory. However, if Roman has opened his mouth, Hans still has to explain, because that red-haired young man owed money and couldn't pay it on time. So of course he was the one in the wrong. However, the Blood Fang clan couldn't handle it with such violence. Most importantly, they had disrespected the eldest son of the Dmitri family. This crime must be paid for with their lives. According to the legal system of this land, those here should be executed, Hans said while constantly swallowing his saliva in fear, especially when facing the bullet-shaped eyes of those blood fangs. After listening to his explanation, Roman seemed to be much more bloodthirsty. He randomly picked up a dry branch from the roadside and declared, "Did you hear that? You guys have violated the laws of this land, and I, the eldest son of Lord Romero Dmitri, will punish you, right now." To Hans, also surprised that the young master today suddenly became majestic as if he had taken the wrong medicine. But the leader and his subordinates were still not worried at all. "Hey, I know you are a noble who doesn't know how twisted this world is. But if you keep doing that, you are forcing us to take action. Saying that, they began to take out their hot goods. It seemed that they were gradually ready to give young Master Roman a fight like from. Of course, with the blood of a martial arts expert in him, Roman's bloodlust was not inferior to theirs at all. He even aggressively rushed forward to attack first. The Blood Fang saw the young master act so recklessly and were a bit confused. They pulled out their daggers and attacked indiscriminately. But unfortunately, Roman now was different from the useless Roman before. The dry tree in his hand suddenly became as sharp as a sword, piercing the throat of the leader. Before the terrifying scene the remaining Blood Fangs were like their tails had been stepped on. They immediately rushed forward at the same time, wanting to gang up on Roman to avenge their comrades. But compared to that prick, these guys were even more chickens. They couldn't even touch a single hair on Roman's head. On the other hand, he also strongly counterattacked. This made Hans gasp in amazement. Oh my god, is this really the useless young Master Roman that he had been following for so long? Despite being in a tense battle, Roman still looked very leisurely. He even had time to think vaguely. Thinking back, the first thing he saw after opening his eyes was Roman's remains and countless pills scattered on the floor. The territory of the Cairo kingdom was always filled with war. The king had ordered to choose a representative from each family, and Roman, who was appointed to replace the Dmitry family to join the army, committed suicide out of fear. With Baek Jun-seo's warlike soul, he had to admit that Roman was a pathetic person. But no matter how he had lived, the current owner of this body was still the head of the Baek Jun-seo's demon sect. And as long as he could control this body, he would live a righteous life like the way Baek Jun-seo had lived. Roman's head was constantly thinking, while his hands were still busy constantly destroying enemies. The Blood Fangs had been almost all defeated by him. Only there was a small guy running madly. It was just a pity that his speed could not keep up with the head of the heavenly demon sect. Roman grabbed his hair and completely controlled all of the other party's actions. That bastard was so scared that he went crazy and kept begging for mercy. To force an organization into a framework, it was mandatory to follow the law. I will not take your life, Roman said calmly, and conveniently snatched the dagger from the other party's hand. But you still have to pay the price for your disrespectful words. After saying that, he jerked the other party's head back. The sharp dagger stabbed straight into his eyes. A terrifying scream rang out. That Blood Fang guy was blinded. His small body was shaking like a weed from the pain. And the surrounding people who witnessed this scene also couldn't stop shivering from fear. Roman took a deep breath. Then took a breath, say it word for word. My name is Roman Dmitry. If any of you are dissatisfied with the punishment I give them, you can come find me at any time. In the previous life, Baek Jung-hyuk climbed to the top of the martial arts world with his invincible strength. Hundreds and thousands of martial artists who came to challenge Baek Jung-hyuk all received the same ending. When their anger melted into a river, the whole world knew that the heavenly demon sect had ruled this martial arts world. Baek Jung-hyuk was always very proud of his achievements. But now he had turned into Roman, and had to walk back and forth on the streets just to deal with these brats. After finishing, Roman ordered Hans to call the guards to deal with the remaining mess. He stared at his bloody arm for a long time and felt extremely disappointed. Because this body was too bad, the meridians were already scarce and the circulation was also poor. Roman thought to himself that he had to quickly gather information about this world, then improve his body. At this moment, the red-haired boy stood up. Young master, thank you for saving my life. Thank you very much. Don't misunderstand. I'm not doing this to save people. Roman replied blandly. The Blood Fang gang had violated the laws of this land, and I was only doing this to punish them. Roman didn't go easy on him because he saw that the young man was seriously injured. He asked the boy to tell his story in detail. He even threatened that if he told even half a lie, his tongue would no longer be in his mouth. The boy's face was already swollen. He began to recount his situation. It turned out that the people who really owed Blood Fang gang money were his parents. They had used their money to buy farmland, and their family could have easily paid off the debt after selling their farm produce. But those Blood Fangs played dirty by destroying all their crops, resulting in them not having the money to repay their debts. It was only later that the boy learned that those bastards were deliberately doing so because they were after his sister. Speaking of this, pain and anger seemed to overflow. The boy knelt down at Roman's feet and cried out miserably. Although we are not rich, we have never harmed anyone before. I beg you, at least save my little sister." In those tearful eyes were many different emotions. There were anger, sorrow, and urgency. When he looked into the eyes of that young man, Roman felt as if he was meeting an acquaintance, one of the 4 previous emperors. Thinking back, the first time he met him seemed to be in a shabby place like this. Memories from his previous life just flashed before his eyes. After a long while, Roman raised his voice and asked, "What is your name?" "Sir, I am Kevin." "Kevin, we will check later to see if what you just said is true or not. What happened today will be properly handled." Kevin quickly kowtowed to thank Roman. A fleeting sense of familiarity, but something seemed to be silently telling him that he might have a long-term bond with this boy. At the same time, an exquisite carriage was slowly entering the Dmitri family's territory. Sitting on the carriage was a beautiful blonde Death Note. She was Flora, Roman's fiancée. Their marriage was decided a month ago and was of course only a political marriage. Because the territory ruled by Flora's family was very unstable, her father was forced to marry her to a powerful family. Flora strongly opposed, but because she was born in an era where women had no say, she eventually had to accept this fact. Of course, Flora did not want to spend the rest of her life with a family of blacksmiths. But because it could save her father, Flora had to closing her eyes and jumping in. Flora was originally going to marry the second young master of the family, a person with a bright future. But that plan changed suddenly because the eldest son of the family, Roman Dmitri, forced her to marry him. Not long after, the carriage arrived. Flora angrily stepped down. Roman in her eyes was just a lavish and hedonistic bastard. Although, Flora could clearly perceive the current situation of her family. But no matter how many times she thought about it, she still felt that Roman was not worthy of her. So when the two met, the first thing Flora said to Roman was, "Mr. Dmitri, I want us to forget about this marriage." Flora thought that this was a hopeless resistance on her part, but she still wanted to resist to the end. Unexpectedly, Roman immediately put on a face of joy. "I think that's fine with me." Flora couldn't help but exclaim loudly, "What's this?" It was clearly Roman who forced her to marry. But now that she wanted to cancel the engagement, she was so happy, like she had a good harvest. "I've also thought about this marriage. This bastard of the Dmitri family really doesn't dare to marry someone like you. So I think it's right to cancel this marriage." The more Roman spoke, the more surprised Flora became, and she looked a little worried. Before Flora could react, Roman had already hastily wanted to report the cancellation of the marriage to her father. She hurriedly spoke up to stop him. "Wait, I heard that it was because you really liked me that you requested this marriage. Now that you're willing to cancel the marriage without any conditions, I'm a little confused. So you want me to marry you? Well, this isn't really. Then don't cause any more trouble for each other. We both agree to cancel the engagement. That's it." After saying that, Roman resolutely turned away. He even affirmed that he would take full responsibility for canceling this engagement. After all, for someone who already had a bad reputation, taking on the title of the person whose engagement was cancelled wouldn't hurt. Flora looked at Roman's back, still not over the shock. She felt that he wasn't like the bastard in the rumors of the world at all. Roman rushed straight into his father's room. "Lord Romero." Not long after, a loud shout came from inside the room. "What did you say?" "Cancel the engagement, just like I told you. I have discussed it with Miss Lorenz." Romero was so angry that he jumped up. He did not hesitate to call his eldest son an idiot. Even though people outside called Roman an idiot, a bastard of the Dmitri family. As a father, Romero always tried to give him a good life. And Flora was also a part of that good life. The political marriage with the Lorenz family was the best way for the Dmitri family to gain a solid position in the upper-class nobility. Moreover, Flora was also famous for being beautiful and polite. Your job was just to marry the beautiful noble girl you wanted. And that was it. Why couldn't you even do that? Romero yelled at Roman. But this much still didn't say anything to him. Roman just bowed his head, continuously apologizing. But that only made Lord Romero furious. He just took the porcelain cup on the desk and threw it straight at his son's face. Originally, if this marriage went smoothly, Romero planned to arrange for Roman to join the army. But if he broke off the engagement, he would be forced to go to war within 6 months. "Do you have anything else to say about this?" Romero thought his son would be like before. Just mentioning about going to the army would scare him away. But now, Roman just lowered his head and calmly said, "No." Romero was even more furious. "I also heard that you just caused trouble with the Blood Fang gang. Witnesses at the scene said that you punished those poor people. But I don't believe it. Surely someone helped you." The reason, Romero said, that was because the Blood Fang was an organization that even he was afraid to mess with. And Roman was a useless son who couldn't do anything properly. He asked him to solve the troubles he had caused himself, and repeatedly affirmed that he would not help Roman clean up the battlefield again. Romero's attitude was very eloquent, but in fact it was just a threat. He thought that his eldest son was about to kneel down and cry and beg for his forgiveness. But unexpectedly, he just calmly said that he had understand and will also handle everything. This is probably the most amazing thing in Romero's entire life. This is the consequence of the things I did. I think I can completely solve it. So, after dealing with all the problems, I will come back later. Roman finished speaking, then left the room and slammed the door. At this time, he took out a handkerchief to wipe away the blood that was flowing down his forehead. Flora was still waiting outside. She was so surprised that it took a long time before she could say, "Are you crazy? Are you still here?" Flora had heard the entire conversation between Roman and Romero, and what surprised her was that Roman had challenged the Blood Fang clan. The bold and daring people who dared to threaten the nobility. What Roman did could lead to the crazy revenge of the entire clan. And Flora feared that he would not be able to handle it without the help of her family. Flora advised Roman to turn around and ask Baron Romero for forgiveness. But he only coldly asked back, "Why should we do that?" Flora choked. Before she could say anything, Roman continued to speak. "Miss Flora, you should know who you are." Roman had already found Flora annoying. Ever since Hans made him change into a tight, cumbersome outfit and sprayed on perfume to welcome her. Roman had just gotten used to this world not long ago, and he believed that marriage was something that would only cause him more trouble. But Hans was right. Roman felt that he shouldn't be rude to a woman who had never harmed him. However, he still wanted to cancel this engagement. It was just that he didn't expect Flora to propose to cancel the engagement first. Moreover, with a rather concave attitude, if the other party didn't respect him like that, then Roman had no reason to respect her anymore. "Miss Flora, it seems that you are quite an arrogant person. I understand where you come from." Sure, she probably didn't care about my situation when it came to breaking off the engagement. But when I said that I would take full responsibility, she started to worry. From the beginning to the end, only Roman spoke, while on the other hand, Flora seemed confused and couldn't say anything for a long time. However, for him, from the moment the two words, "break off the engagement," came out of Flora's mouth, she no longer had the right to interfere in his decision. From this moment on, we have nothing to do with each other anymore. So each person should take care of their own business. Roman coldly left, leaving Flora in shame. The reason he said that he would take full responsibility was to avoid any problems that might arise after breaking off the engagement. And because he didn't want to have anything to do with Flora Lawrence anymore. Although she was very beautiful, Roman still hoped that this would be the first and last time they met. "I have so many things to think about. How can I get married with so much housework?" Roman wasn't sad, but there was someone in the house who was sad that night. That was Lord Romero. He drank a lot of wine even though his wife Lihanna tried to stop him. The reason why the Baron was so sad was because of the cup he accidentally threw at his precious son's head. "Lihanna, I hit Roman again when I was a commoner. I used to beat him often. After we became nobles, I promised myself that I would never let my children go through such things again. Thanks to this promise of Romero, their other children all grew up safely. But Roman was the most rebellious of them all and also the one who gave Romero the most headaches. It's just that he was the only child who went through a difficult time with his father. So he didn't know how to treat Roman properly. Lihanna thought that as a father, Romero still lacked a lot missing, but they are also the only ones who can correct their children's wrongdoings." Facing her eldest son's willfulness, she also had headaches many times. But with the tolerance of a mother, Lihanna still believed that Roman would change, and Romero would never abandon his child. "Are you talking about the Blood Fang gang?" Lihanna nodded. She understood her son very well. Roman Dmitri was a proud child, and if he said that he could handle the Blood Fang gang by himself, it would probably just be a big mouth. As parents at this time, They should not abandon their children. So Lihanna wanted her husband to send Captain Jonathan to help him. Romero found her words reasonable. Therefore, she immediately accepted Jonathan's arrival. But in reality, the proud child who was only good at talking big that Lihanna knew had already disappeared. Roman said that he could handle it himself. Because he could handle it himself. Because now, he was wandering around the streets helplessly with Hans. Young master, the Blood Fang gang could come and take revenge on us at any time. It's dangerous for you to go out like this. Why don't we go back? These past 2 days, the eldest young master has been like taking the wrong medicine, making him extremely tired. Of course, Hans said that, but if he said it again, Roman had no intention of going back. Hey Hans, since when do you think the Blood Fang gang has the power they possess now? He suddenly asked. Hans shook his head. He really didn't know about this. But Roman knew. After returning home, he took the opportunity to learn about these Blood Fangs. They started to become famous through scandals, through merciless massacres of their opponents. And those scandals made others afraid. From there, their more and more disturbing actions became more and more effective. So what's the key here? The Blood Fang gang isn't really that hard to deal with. They're only dangerous when they can make people tremble before their swords. So today Roman wants to go out. He wants to find out for himself how much the Blood Fang's reputation has affected the people in his territory. The two of them walked around until they were bored, so they stopped at a restaurant called Atelier. After ordering a table full of food, Roman told Hans to stay and enjoy it himself. And he wanted to go out and investigate further, because this could be dangerous for him. But Hans, who was still attracted to that banquet 10 seconds ago, now stood up resolutely. It can't be. Even if I'm in danger, I will never let the young master go alone. Roman was both amused and a little touched. It seemed that Hans was really a loyal person. If not, he wouldn't have been able to follow that idiot Roman for so long until he died. However, in reality, Hans couldn't help him at all right now. He might even get in the way if Roman was caught by the Blood Fangs. Don't sacrifice yourself in such a meaningless way. You and I going out is enough. I'll be back soon. Roman left the restaurant, and Hans was there alone, still dazed for a long time. He didn't expect that one day the young master would say these words to him, and even specially order a table for him while waiting for him to come back. Just like that, he suddenly became thoughtful, but suddenly, Hans remembered something. He was no longer in the mood to enjoy it and directly rushed out of the restaurant. Roman wandered alone on the street, thinking for a long time as he walked. In the past few days, he had learned something about the Blood Fang gang, that their strength is not too formidable. But because they act in groups, it is very difficult to hunt them all down. After the Kevin incident, they are definitely holding back, because they are afraid of the consequences they will have to bear if they cannot destroy Roman. He could not find them, so he found a way to make them come to him. That is also the reason why Roman dragged Hans out to the street today to walk around and asked him to stay at the restaurant to eat by himself. Surely, the Blood Fang intelligence already knows where he is now. Moreover, today is also the regular training day of the Duchy family's guard team. So the number of guards on the street has been significantly reduced. That means, if the Blood Fang gang plans to take revenge on Roman, today is the best opportunity. His calculation is not wrong at all. And indeed, after wandering around the street, the Blood Fang gang has indeed come to find him. This time, they came in larger numbers and of course each of them was armed. As for Hans, he had already rushed back to the Duchy castle to meet the captain of the guard Jonathan. Although he had witnessed the young master alone fighting the Blood Fangs at the market a few days ago. But Hans was still worried that if he kept wandering around like that, something would happen. Captain, we must go find young Master Roman immediately, Hans said while panting from running. The young master is in danger. Although Hans was right to worry. But who is in danger from whom is unknown. In the deserted alley, Roman is warming up his muscles by letting the guys who want to kill him. At first, he was empty-handed, but then he snatched the enemy's dagger, so he was even more like a tiger with wings. With his fighting experience and determination from his previous life, Roman quickly took the life of a guy without any change in his mind. This made the remaining assassins extremely panic. What the hell is going on? Is this the idiot from Dimitri's house that we heard about? Roman burst out laughing. What are you guys standing there for? Come on in. At the same time, Hans was frantically bringing up the matter of the young master going to fight the Blood Fang gang without bringing any guards. However, when Jonathan and the guards heard it, they could only laugh because they felt that this was too absurd. Young Master Roman in their impressions had always been the weakest person in the world. How could he go to fight? That's the truth. Why should I lie to you about that? Hans raised his voice. His seriousness made Captain Jonathan really think again. Coincidentally, not long ago, Lord Dimitri also came to him to ask for this matter. If one person spoke up, Jonathan might not believe it, but this was both of them mentioning the same thing. He felt very annoyed that the young master kept causing trouble while not even knowing how to use a single weapon. And even though he didn't really want to, Jonathan still had to order the entire army to prepare their weapons and go save the young master. Rest assured, as long as we are here, they won't be able to touch a finger of young Master Dimitri. Jonathan firmly affirmed to Hans. But in his heart he was secretly annoyed by the trouble Roman brought. That was also the moment Roman had just cut the throat of a Blood Fang. After a few seconds of surprise, the remaining two also rushed forward to kill brother. But their ferocity could not compete with the excellent skills of a master who had spent his whole life in the martial arts world. And even though he was ambushed by the council, Roman was still extremely calm. Very quickly, the two remaining Blood Fangs were defeated by him, one of whom was kept alive. Roman seemed quite disappointed when he saw that they had only brought 3 people over. And of course, he left the last one alive to interrogate him. The knife in Roman's hand ruthlessly stabbed straight into the opponent's tail, causing him more pain than death. When the opponent had fallen into panic, Roman began his interrogation. Now, first, who is your leader? With his experience from his previous life, it wasn't too difficult for Roman to force a living person to confess to him orally. After questioning that bastard, he went to a bar alone. The faces of those who were drinking inside changed as soon as they saw Roman, especially when he appeared covered in blood. Hello sir, young master. The bar owner took the initiative to ask Roman before he went straight to the bar. The surrounding area began to buzz with whispers. Roman heard everything but pretended to be deaf. The bar owner asked what he wanted to order. Roman replied that he wanted to drink a Tear of Dawn, the type brewed before the 20s. Sorry sir, but our bar doesn't have this type. Let me introduce you to another drink. That's fine, get me something strong. I have work to do in the morning, so I need to get a little drunk. Mr. Roman's reply sounded unrelated, but it made everyone present pay attention, because it was a special code that he had gotten from the bald guy's mouth earlier. According to him, they usually receive missions in this tavern after reading the correct code. And the code was 3 phrases. Tears of Dawn, something strong, and things to do in the morning. Read in the correct order. After Roman did exactly what he had told him, the attitude of the people in the tavern immediately became hostile. And even the tavern owner. He was the first to pull out the fence and give the order to attack. However, he was also the first to fall, just because of Roman's punch. At the moment the tavern owner fell, all the customers in the tavern held weapons and rushed towards Roman. Normal people who saw this scene could not help but feel terrified. They covered each other leaving the tavern. He kept shouting, "Quickly call the guards to deal with this." After the innocent people left, Roman was even more free. Even though he had no weapons in his hands, he was still able to finish off 3 bastards in a flash. This made the remaining guys unable to help but be wary. This didn't seem to be the cowardly and useless Roman Dimitri they knew. As if he could read the minds of these bastards, Roman just chuckled to himself. Of course, he wasn't the Roman they knew anymore, but the head of the famous heavenly demons sect in his previous life. Because he had the greatest martial arts techniques in his hands, he had strengthened his body's physique in just a few short days. Although Roman's current level couldn't compare to himself in his previous life, these flies couldn't trouble him either. When Roman had finished off all the other soldiers, the tavern owner crawled up. You woke up just in time. I also just finished this bunch. Young master, why did you do that? Don't pretend to be stupid. You were the one who attacked me first. And here there's only you and me. These things make me extremely curious. Let's talk. The wine seller had the feeling that standing in front of him now was no longer the Lord's young master Roman, but a real evil god. That made him unable to control himself. His whole body kept shaking. Not long after, Jonathan led the guards straight into the tavern. but the messy scene on the ground made it difficult for him to calm down. What the hell is going on? Could this all be the young master's work? While Jonathan was going around to check the situation, his subordinates were already checking the second floor. There was only one person who was still alive, and he said that Roman had gone to Lawrence territory. What? Why did the young master go to Lawrence? Jonathan was confused. Didn't Roman just break off his engagement with Miss Flora? Oh, he said that the Blood Fang gang's lair was in Lawrence. Going back an hour, Roman also used force to threaten the owner to tell the truth. At first, when he had cut off 2 of the guy's fingers, the guy was still very stubborn and refused to say a word. But this didn't make Roman angry. On the contrary, he was very happy, because those who never open their mouths, no matter how much torture, even death, are the ones who hide the most valuable information. You're just wasting time doing this. Just kill me and be done with it. So what? Then let's do a test, to see if you really keep your mouth shut no matter what I do. Force can't threaten this bastard, but blood can. Roman had already noticed the photo on the table. The person standing next to him in the photo, based on his age, could be guessed to be a boy. Roman used the boy to threaten. And sure enough, this method worked. The other party was so angry that his hair stood on end, even though he already had no hair left. You bastard. A noble, but you use your family to threaten me. The other guy angrily shouted. Roman didn't answer. Instead, he held the photo and walked closer. I recently learned something very interesting about the Blood Fang gang. Do you want to hear it? Indeed, Roman had gathered quite a bit of information these past few days. He knew that the people in the gang could sacrifice their lives just to get revenge. And there was one thing they had in common. That was that they were not bad people. But because of their debts to the Blood Fang gang, they were turned into slaves of the gang. That damn organization had driven people to the brink of death, using their families as hostages to threaten them at any time. Therefore, they had such a large number of members and were willing to sacrifice their lives for the organization. The more Roman spoke, the more the other guy's face became unsightly. He thought that even if he knew the truth, he wouldn't be able to change anything, because the Blood Fang gang would definitely hunt him down and destroy them to get revenge. Hey, think about it carefully. You have to be careful to place your bets properly. Roman suddenly burst out laughing, then threw the photo frame in his hand down at the other guy's feet. The photo frame immediately shattered. Fan, when I said I would take your son's life, I was serious. I swear by the name Roman Dimitri. He even did not hesitate to describe how painfully he would take his son's life. This made the prankster really rack his brain to make a decision. Whether he should keep his mouth shut for the sake of the Blood Fang clan and let his son go in pain, or reveal all the information Roman needed. His final decision was probably known to everyone, because when Jonathan arrived, the young master had already departed for Lawrence. And at the back of the Blood Fang clan, they were also in chaos after hearing the news that their entire branch in Dimitri had been defeated. And the most humiliating thing was that they were defeated by a young master who was famous for being incompetent, even without the way to enter the Royal Sword Academy. Where is Roman? The leader asked. He just left Dimitri's territory. I think he probably got the information from the tavern. Is he alone? Yes. The leader felt it was ridiculous that Roman dared to come here alone. That meant he underestimated their strength. He immediately ordered the remaining manpower of the gang to be ready for battle. It was best to take Roman's life before the Dimitri family's guards arrived. While speaking, he kept growling, Roman Dimitri, you dare to touch our Blood Fang gang? Today I must take your life. Then hang your body in the middle of the central square so that the reputation of the Blood Fang clan can be revived. While Roman was busy dealing with these gangsters, his father-in-law, Lord Lawrence, was also having a headache over another problem. He heard that the Barco family had recently borrowed a large sum of money from the gold bank. And the only reason for this action was that they were preparing for war. Moreover, the royal family seemed to be on the Barco family's side, so they let them do whatever they wanted to do. And if war broke out, Lawrence would definitely lose the battle. It must be said that the Lawrence family has always lived and ruled this fertile land well for many years. Although there are documents proving that their ancestors mortgaged this territory to the Barco family, the elders in the Lawrence family have never accepted it, and now clarifying it is useless when the Barco family is ready to fight. The only thing Lord Lawrence could do was to never give up his territory to anyone. If the Barco family did not want to compromise, Then the Lawrence family would have to do their best to resist them. And that was why he arranged a political marriage with the Dmitry family. As soon as this name was mentioned, the nobles were overjoyed. They had forgotten this important name. Although the entire Dmitry family came from rough blacksmiths, it was undeniable that they were now one of the richest families in the northeast. No matter how much the Barko family borrowed, they were not as rich as the Dmitry family. If the Dmitry family backed Lawrence, his position would be much more solid, and that was why the Lord had to send his only daughter to the so-called idiot of the Dmitry family. Roman. It was all for the sake of the family's legacy. Lawrence family. Lord, please don't blame yourself. Yes, marrying Dmitry family was the right decision. Their meeting was heard by Flora outside. But she didn't dare knock on the door because she didn't know how to tell them about her arbitrarily breaking off her engagement with Dmitry family's young master. Her mood was very chaotic now. Half of her feeling very guilty for not listening to her father. Half of her feeling that she had made the right decision for her own happiness. Flora kept walking back and forth in front of the meeting room door, until she had gathered enough courage to prepare to step inside and confess everything. A knight rushed over in a panic. My lord, that person only had time to briefly ask Flora before rushing into the meeting room. Something big happened, my lord. The big thing he wanted to report was that Jonathan had led his army to the gates of Lawrence City. However, the Lawrence Knights would definitely not open the gate if Jonathan and his men did not put down their weapons. Jonathan was now burning with anxiety for fear that something would happen to Lord Romero's gold nugget. Hey, if anything happens to young Master Roman, I will not forgive you. This guy is really annoying. How can I let you guys charge into the city with weapons? While the two captains, one on the wall and one below, were arguing intensely, a soldier hurriedly ran over to report that Lawrence Square was in chaos at the moment. Because Roman, covered in blood, was strangling the Blood Fang gang leader and dragging him through the middle of the square, ignoring the other party who was desperately begging for his life. Just a moment ago, the Blood Fang leader thought that this was a simple matter. He thought that his opponent was just a foolish noble. The important thing was that he was alone. Meanwhile, his side had a lot of people and were fully equipped with weapons. And each of them was very fierce, willing to sacrifice their lives for the organization. The leader thought that even if he used his knees to reason, he could guess that his side would definitely win. But that scenario was beautiful. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. Roman single-handedly attacked Blood Fang gang's lair. After that, he quickly finished off all the berries, right in front of the old leader's eyes. He was so shocked that he couldn't stand up. When Roman was walking step by step with an extremely threatening expression, only one thought remained in his mind. I'm about to go sell salt. I know that. But because he was too scared, he couldn't move. Although he didn't want to go up to the cabinet to watch the naked chicken. His body was completely out of control. In front of him was truly a ferocious god. The result was already seen by everyone. He was beaten black and blue by Roman. Only a faint breath remained and he was dragged straight to the square. He dragged him to the most crowded place, then let go. The Blood Fang leader, who had once been very arrogant, now humbled himself and knelt on the ground to beg for his life. He said that as long as Roman spared his life, he could do whatever he wanted, even become a loyal dog serving him for the rest of his life. You will become my dog. Roman sneered in response. You should have said that before showing your fangs. After saying that, he fiercely kicked the other party again, his forehead hitting the cold ground. Roman then clearly declared to the people the true identity of this bastard. The people all knew about the cruelty of the Blood Fang gang. So when they heard Roman accuse the leader, they were all very surprised, and also very angry. All the crimes of the Blood Fang gang were too obvious. Therefore, before today, I will tear apart the evil seed inside them, Roman said, raising his foot again. The weak-minded civilians didn't even dare to look at this scene. Jonathan had already urged his horse to chase after him. But what he witnessed was only the bloody corpse of that leader. The soldiers immediately reported this to Lord Lawrence. The reason they opened the city gate to allow Roman to enter the territory was because he was the fiancé of Miss Flora. But what no one expected was that about an hour later, he dragged a bloody man to the middle of the square. After clearly identifying that person as Ben Millet, the leader of the Blood Fang clan, Roman executed him in front of everyone. The elders who were discussing with the Lord at that time were immediately in an uproar. Their reaction was the same as everyone else's. They all felt that this was absurd. How could a loser like Roman Dmitri capture the Blood Fang leader himself? And even execute him? Most importantly, Roman had publicly murdered a person in the Lawrence territory without the Lord's permission. This was an act of tyranny, and the elders of the family did not want to let this go. But Lord Lawrence did not think so. The only thing he cared about now was that his future son-in-law could single-handedly take down the Blood Fang clan. This made the Lord suddenly curious, and he wanted to see Roman immediately. Not long after, he was brought to the meeting room. Roman's appearance was now very majestic, and he had Jonathan assisting him. Lord Lawrence had an answer as soon as he saw his face. He thought that he could take down the Blood Fang clan because of the support of the Dmitri family's guards. "Hello, Baron Lawrence. I am Roman Dmitri." Roman stood up straight, greeted the person of higher status but did not bow his head. Lord Lawrence did not pay attention to those cumbersome formalities. Instead, he wanted to hear what had just happened from Roman's own mouth. Why did he come all the way to Lawrence territory to commit such a violent act? "And the other day, the Blood Fang gang assaulted an innocent citizen in my territory, and I executed them on the spot." Roman began to recount the story from when he met Kevin. The conference room door was closed. Flora, who was currently lurking outside, was also very curious. She called a guard over to ask why Roman appeared here and why he entered his father's conference room. "Miss, don't you know anything?" The guard sighed heavily, then also recounted the story that happened on the street. In the study, Roman also recounted the whole story, the process of capturing the Blood Fang clan. And the more he told the story, the worse Lord Lawrence's face became. "What I want to ask is who gave you the right to do that? You don't have the right to execute anyone in this Lawrence territory." "I know, but whether or not Sir Lawrence can thoroughly handle the Blood Fang gang is a question that makes me very skeptical." Roman replied back. "Ben Millet, the gang leader, is not a stranger or a mystery. He is extremely famous in Lawrence for countless crimes. Ben has even been imprisoned countless times but was released on bail." That was all the information Roman gathered from the tavern owner, so he decided to come here to thoroughly handle it himself. Because he did not trust the Lawrence family, Roman just said, "Very well." Jonathan was scared pale. "I want to ask you a question. Sir Baron, did I really do something wrong?" Lord Lawrence was silent for a few seconds, then raised his head and asked the person sitting closest to him. "Do you know Ben Millet?" He is a criminal, but I really don't know that he is the leader of the Blood Fang gang." The person replied in confusion. "Okay, I know, then we don't need to discuss this matter any further, because this wouldn't have happened in the first place if the Lawrence family had handled it more properly." In fact, Roman did the right thing, even though it was a bit too much. Lord Lawrence also understood that. So even though it was a bit embarrassing, he couldn't be blamed. He had to let Roman and Jonathan go out, not forgetting to promise to reward them later. The door of the study opened, and it wasn't until Roman's figure disappeared that Lord Lawrence let out a hearty laugh. So that was Roman Dmitri. He's good. The nobleman still didn't want to forgive Roman's abuse of power, but unfortunately, Lawrence didn't like his son-in-law this much, and he was willing to forgive even though Roman was not showing any respect. Lawrence even anxiously called Flora over. He wanted to tell his daughter that her future husband was not a fool, so that she could rest assured about this marriage. Meanwhile, Roman obediently got on his horse and followed Jonathan back home. On the way, Captain Jonathan couldn't help but ask him, "Young master, do you really have to mock Baron Lawrence so much? We're lucky to be able to get out safely like this. But what if he gets angry?" Even though everyone thought that Roman had just done something terrible, he was still calm, because he knew that what he did only further proved that everything was due to the carelessness and negligence of the Lawrence family. Moreover, looking at the Baron's attitude, he probably didn't know about the broken engagement, so he couldn't punish his daughter's fiancé. Jonathan got goosebumps, because the young master suddenly became strangely intelligent. Not only did he become stronger, but even going straight to Lawrence and causing trouble like that was already in his calculations. This made Jonathan wonder, like many others. Is the Roman Dmitri in front of him still the idiot of the Dmitri family that he knew? Along the way, Roman was also lost in thought, because he suddenly remembered his childhood memories. Born as the son of a demon, that meant Roman was not protected by his parents. Love like other normal children. Even his father bluntly threw his son into a world where only the strong could survive. Roman had lived with beatings since he was young and had gradually rebelled. Gradually rising from the bottom of society like that. The sky gradually turned dark when they returned to the Dimitri mansion. The first thing Roman did was to take a bath to wash away the smell of blood on his body. He felt as if all his strength had been drained from his body. It seemed that being in Roman's body had made him much more easily exhausted. However, after waking up in a new body, Roman had also experienced many new things. And most of those experiences were related to the Blood Fang gang. In order to destroy them, Roman had destroyed everything that stood in his way. It could be said in the most brutal way. However, even so, he had not a single regret. Because when he was back Jung-hyuk, he was also such a person who was willing to tear apart, torture those who got in his way and use all means to eliminate those who had the same heart as him. That was the life he had lived before, and it would not change even when he became Roman Dimitri. But after this event, Roman temporarily did not want to go out and cause trouble anymore. Because he had not yet fully discovered the rules of this world. And again, his strength now had also decreased quite a bit compared to before. While Roman was racking his brain to think of a way to improve his strength, the servant outside announced that the Lord wanted to see him. Roman quickly finished bathing and changed his clothes, preparing to go see his father. At the same time, in the study, Jonathan told Romero about the things he had witnessed in Lawrence. The Lord seemed to find it hard to believe his ears. Because up until now, Roman had always been a special child of his father. He was the only son with no impressive talent. But when Romero was still a normal blacksmith, Roman was also the one who loved him the most. He even went all the way to the blacksmith shop to give him a candy. Just because he was afraid that his father was working too hard. Because of that, Romero always wanted to give Roman a happy life, and tried to pamper him. But he didn't expect that his love would make Roman go astray. In fact, he had long since given up on his eldest son. However, these past few days, after hearing that Roman had defeated the Blood Fang gang, the hope that seemed to have died out flared up once again. The two of them were talking about this when Roman knocked on the door. Romero heard his son's voice, seemingly a little moved. He didn't care what method he used to defeat the Blood Fang gang. But as long as Roman truly achieved something on his own, Romero was willing to do anything for him, as a way to atone for being a flawed father. Is that Roman? I heard that you took care of the Blood Fang gang yourself. Is that true? Roman pondered, looking at Romero's expression at this moment. It could be seen that he was very much expecting his answer. And if he told the truth, he would look at him with a completely different eye. But these achievements that exceeded expectations would one day bite him back. So at this stage, Roman wanted to hide his talent a little. Originally, Roman had intended to hide the truth, like small breaths of memories that kept rushing back. Back then, when most children were protected and loved by their parents, he was thrown into a world where only the strongest could rule over all. And he crawled from the darkest place to that dominant position, by clearly asserting the superiority he possessed. Therefore, in this life, Roman wanted to be loved and recognized. Finally, in response to Romero's question, he frankly admitted his achievements. Because he was a devil who never hid his outstanding talent. And so immediately after that, Romero and Jonathan led Roman to the training ground of the guard team. The soldiers here were all confused when they saw the useless young master suddenly appear in the arena. It was even more confusing when Captain Jonathan announced that Roman was here today to practice swordsmanship. And he asked the soldiers who wanted to spar with him to step forward. The crowd below gulped in tension. In their eyes, Roman was just a fool and no one wanted to duel with him at all. If he couldn't control his strength and hurt the young master, his head might fly off. And the reason why Lord Dimitri brought his son here was to return an hour ago. That was when Roman affirmed that he had defeated the Blood Fang gang by himself. Although this was the answer that Romero wished, but it still made him feel puzzled. How could I defeat the Blood Fang gang? Roman's head started spinning, just to think of a reasonable answer that wouldn't let Romero suspect anything. So he lied that he had actually been secretly practicing swordplay all this time. He also added that he wanted to prove to his father that the person everyone called the idiot of the Dimitri family could also achieve something on his own. Roman also told the information he had learned about the Blood Fang gang. And also told how he lured their leader out and defeated him. Romero was more and more surprised as he listened. That story proved that his son had not only improved in swordsmanship but also knew how to calculate very meticulously. And was also very brave when he went straight into the enemy's lair. Romero was silent for a long time. He was used to his eldest son being a useless person. Now that he had changed so drastically, saying it was impressive was not enough. Romero had to use two extraordinary words to describe what had happened these past few days. After a while of pondering, it was only after a long time that he spoke up. Son, can I ask you a favor? Father, tell me. Lord Dimitri expressed his wish to see Roman's swordsmanship with his own eyes. To see how much his son had changed. And that was the reason why Roman suddenly appeared at the training ground like this. However, Jonathan had asked for the third time, but no soldier dared to stand up and fight the young master. Jonathan had a headache. He needed to choose a talented person who could subdue Roman, to both maintain the prestige of the knights and affirm the young master's talent. Of course, Jonathan was very suitable for this, but as the captain of the knights, he couldn't draw his sword just because of this kind of thing. Therefore, Jonathan appointed a name. That was Chris, the vice-captain of the Dimitri Knights. As soon as he heard his name, Chris's face turned pale. His impression of Roman was really not very good. The first time they met was last year, when he went out to deal with a drunk who was causing a disturbance, obstructing the business of a restaurant on the street. It wouldn't have been worth mentioning if the drunk who was making a fuss and throwing things around was Roman. While stopping Roman from making a ruckus, Chris received a slap in the face. At that moment, he realized that this young master had never trained in his entire life. His strength was even worse than that of a normal person. It was too pathetic. And Chris was completely Roman was considered a piece of trash at that time, living in a cramped space. But now he had to duel Roman. This made him both hateful and embarrassed. Chris spoke up, wanting to object, but Jonathan absolutely did not give him that chance. Young Master Roman being able to confront the entire Blood Fang gang alone was a rare talent. And for the match to be fair, you are the most suitable person here. Chris understood the captain's personality. He had no right to refuse anymore. So he had to hold the wooden sword and enter the training ground. While Jonathan was giving the signal to prepare, Chris suddenly made a request. I was taught that when using a sword, even if it was a practice match, I had to fight as if I was stepping onto a real battlefield. And no matter who the opponent was, I was not allowed to be merciful. If you accept this request, I would be honored to spar with young Master Roman. Chris's words were full of attitude. He felt that Roman definitely could not wipe out the Blood Fang gang by himself. If he was forced to spar with him, Chris also wanted to take this opportunity to teach Roman a lesson. Captain Jonathan looked at the Lord and then at the young master, as if waiting for him to give his opinion. However, Roman was not nervous at all, and even smiled slyly, making Chris foam at the mouth. Jonathan also understood that this smile of his was a way of accepting Chris's request. So he signaled for both sides to get into position. Chris did not know where a weak-handed person like Roman got the courage to spar with him. But looking at his confident expression, it seemed that the one who started to panic was Chris. As soon as the two words, "start," were shouted, Chris took a strong momentum and charged towards his opponent. His speed made the other knights have to surprise, because this was the first time Chris fought with all his might. On the opposite side, Roman's eyes also suddenly became strangely sharp, and he blocked the first blow in the stunned face of Captain Jonathan. Chris was forced back a few steps by the recoil of the block just now. An unconcealable doubt appeared on his face. From the force that Chris felt through the block just now, to Roman's defensive posture, everything was extremely solid and strong. Is this the weak young Master Roman that he once knew? Chris frowned, quickly stabilizing his emotions. He didn't know why the young master could block his attack. But at this moment, only giving Roman a block would satisfy him. So Chris took the initiative to attack again. This time instead of blocking, Roman quickly dodged to the right. Chris's reaction was not bad, immediately changing the direction of the attack. But perhaps because he was too impatient, he revealed his haste. Instead, Roman was still extremely calm. When Chris thought he had found his weakness, Roman still dodged the attack. And the missed attack caused him to reveal his own weakness. Roman fiercely attacked back, not knowing whether it was intentional or not. But the tip of the sword was only about a hand's breadth away from the opponent's face. Chris was frightened. immediately retreating back to gasp for breath. The move just now was really too dangerous. If Roman had just attacked a little more, he would have been hit then. The onlookers couldn't help but be surprised. But Roman, who was enjoying the full attention, was still very calm. Chris clenched his teeth. The Roman in front of him was not like the one in his memory at all. From defense, dodging to attacking, he didn't show any weakness. Like this, Chris was afraid that he would lose. Just thinking about this, he secretly scolded himself. What are you thinking, Chris? Your opponent is that idiot Dimitri. And because Chris's opponent is Roman, he can't allow himself to lose in front of so many people like this. Before Chris could adjust his emotions to continue the match, Roman spoke first. It seems like this warm-up is enough. These words were like a slap in the face to Chris. He had just struggled like this. But for Roman it was just a warm-up. As soon as Roman finished speaking, Chris saw his sword coming in front of him. The speed was terrifying. He unconsciously raised his sword to block, but still encountered many difficulties. Roman had absolutely no intention of letting the opponent react in time. He started to attack continuously. This extraordinary scene caused all the other knights to gape in amazement. As for Chris, he struggled more and more. At this moment, he could only grit his teeth and struggle to defend against the young master's attack. On the other hand, Chris was still looking for an opportunity to counterattack. At this moment, he saw Roman's exposed chest. Seizing that opportunity, Chris took a step back to gain momentum and then rushed forward. But unexpectedly, the sword did not stab them but saw Roman smiling very smugly. At that moment, Chris understood one thing. Roman had just deliberately exposed an opening to lure him into attacking. At this moment, the fear of losing had also made Chris lose his mind, only to see the sword in his hand emitting a dazzling blue halo. And even Jonathan was panicking. Chris, stop. With a loud bang, the training ground was shaken to an unprecedented extent. Dust was everywhere. Lord Romero was immediately panicked, his eyes constantly searching for his precious son. But when the dust cleared, Roman was still unharmed. Moreover, it also blocked the opponent's one-star halo just now. The victory or defeat had been decided. Chris was almost exhausted, immediately falling backwards under Roman's triumphant gaze. To be fair, Chris's strength was not weak at all. When he was appointed as the vice leader of the Knights, he had made the members of the Knights stunned by his young age. Chris was also a student trained by Jonathan. After only 2 years of sword training, he had sensed mana and only spent 3.5 years to become the Knight Asura Basal. There were many rumors surrounding Chris. That his swordsmanship was superb. These rumors were not wrong. Even Jonathan was very satisfied with his student. Because Chris had both talent and innate talent, and both enterprising and professional, he believed that in the future, he would go very far. But today, in front of everyone present at the training ground, Chris was humiliatingly beaten down by the so-called Dimitri's son-in-law. The moment he fell, everyone there was sprayed with hard glue. Romero couldn't believe his eyes. Because Jonathan had always praised Chris as Dimitri's favorite 2-star Asura Basal Knight. And Jonathan couldn't believe his eyes even more. Just a month ago, Roman was still a troublemaker. A person who had only trained for 1 or 2 years couldn't possibly have the high-level skills he had just shown. Let alone in a month. Looking at the way Roman performed his moves, Jonathan felt that those moves must have been practiced for decades. Lord, please don't be too surprised. But it seems that the young master is a swordsmanship genius. Jonathan timidly said the thoughts in his head at the moment. Meanwhile, Roman was seriously observing his opponent who was lying flat on the ground. Undeniably, Chris knew how to actively attack and aggressively fight against the enemy. His combat concentration was also quite sharp. With this level, Roman affirmed that Chris was completely capable of chewing up the entire Blood Fang gang without leaving any crumbs alone. No wonder Captain Jonathan was so proud of him. By the standards of the knights here, Chris was already an elite warrior. However, by Roman standards, Chris was the weakest. However, the most brilliant ultimate move he unleashed surprised him quite a bit. Before Roman could think any further, Romero's crisp laughter pulled him back to reality. It seemed that the Lord was immersed in happiness and pride for his son me. Captain Jonathan himself said that his son was a sword genius. Romero waved his hand, calling Roman to come closer to him. Now the Lord believed that he could handle the entire Blood Fang clan by himself. and he wanted to praise his eldest son for deciding to achieve the first great achievement in his life. Therefore, Romero decided to fulfill a wish of his own. Hearing this, Roman was as happy as if he had found gold. Father once said that I have to go to the battlefield within the next half year. Right, because we are no longer in harmony with the Lawrence family. Upon hearing this, Lord Romero immediately guessed that Roman did not want to go to the battlefield anymore. You mean you do not want to desert anymore? Right? No, I want you to let me choose my own men. Romero was stunned. There was still half a year until the battle. He originally thought his son would bargain, but he was straightforward and said that he wanted to go to war. Feeling that his son seemed to have grown up overnight, Romero agreed to his wish and allowed Roman to decide his own life. While his father was happy, Roman decided to ask for one more thing. And of course he agreed. This made him feel very satisfied. But there was someone who was not. That someone was Chris. After waking up from a long period of unconsciousness, the first thing he heard was that the Lord had personally appointed him to teach Asura to young Master Roman. Chris strongly objected, only because he felt very humiliated. Just now, Chris had to use Asura to fight Roman, but was still defeated by him with ordinary sword techniques. This made Chris just want to find a hole to crawl into. And now the Lord also wanted him to teach Asura to Roman. This was truly an insult to others, but at first, Chris strongly objected, but Jonathan made a deal with him himself. He wanted Chris to teach Roman and find out what was different about him. If he could handle this, Jonathan would hand over all his secrets to him. Chris was so excited that he stood up to teach despite his whole body aching. What is this? This was a very good deal. If he agreed, his master would give him the secret to becoming a 3-star Asura Knight. Although he didn't like meeting Roman at all, because this condition was so attractive, Chris finally agreed. That night, Roman returned to his room to enjoy his luxurious life. Hans seemed surprised when the useless young master he served defeated the best 2-star Asura Knight in the area. Since defeating Chris, Roman kept hearing people mention Asura but didn't understand what it was. He asked Hans about this, but he also didn't know very well. Isn't that the power to use mana? Roman was silent. It seems that in this place, that thing is called mana. He was sure that what Chris had just shown in the late afternoon was a form of overflowing energy. However, the way people here, the use of energy was still different from the world in which Roman lived in his previous life. And about the thing they called Asura here, Roman felt that it was not very effective. He did not know why they used such a source of energy. But from that moment on, Roman had an additional ambition, which was to teach the people of this world to relearn about the potential power in their bodies. So the next morning, Chris went to see Roman with a fresh wound on his face and an unwilling state. Before the two of them started training, he briefly explained to Roman what Asura was. Simply put, Asura is a way for knights to use their mana. If mages use mana by storing it in magic spells, knights store mana throughout their bodies. The first person to create this concept of Asura was Emperor Alexander. All over with mages storing mana in various objects and forms. He was the first to discover that storing mana in the body itself would strengthen the body's physical condition. And Asura was the release of this mana stored inside the body. Mana normally flows throughout the body, and humans can completely increase their strength by concentrating and releasing that mana. However, Chris thought that learning about the history of mana was not important. Because only a select few could use mana in this way. In 1,000 people, only one person chose to become an Asura Knight. And in tens of thousands of people, only one person could follow the path of becoming a mage. Therefore, testing whether one had the appropriate ability was the most important. The minimum requirement that Asura Knights had to achieve was the ability to sense mana. Chris also had to inform Roman in advance that most people all failed at this step. Even he, a person who was hailed as a genius in swordsmanship, had to spend half a year to be able to sense mana. As for normal people, that process would usually take more than a year. The more Chris spoke, the more Roman felt that he was showing off his genius title. And that also made him very impatient. Let's start trying to sense mana. Can you explain to me how I did it back then? Of course, Chris replied, his eyes filled with hatred. He felt that Roman was very proud and arrogant, because he had defeated him. But people have always known that swordsmanship and mana control are completely different. And Chris was really looking forward to Roman being humiliated for failing to control his mana. But what Chris didn't expect was that Roman already knew how to sense mana. Who said he wasn't the original Roman Dimitri but Bak Jung-hyuk? In his previous life, Roman was already a mage, and because of that, he could store a small amount of mana. However, if he only knew how to rely on what he had, it would be difficult to avoid decline and ruin in the end. Roman wanted to try to learn the way of people in this world first. Therefore, for now, he would obediently follow the way Chris taught him. Roman focused his mind to the maximum, doing exactly as Chris taught him. His entire body began to emit a dazzling golden halo, when the light was so bright that it was hard to ignore. Chris opened his eyes and was shocked. Roman's Asura was so bright that it made people want to go blind. Roman slowly opened his eyes. Everything was just as he thought. In this world, the way to utilize mana was completely useless. Mana in the martial arts world in his previous life would completely eliminate all impurities in the body, in order to achieve the ultimate goal of storing mana in his trained body. However, in this world, there was an energy system completely different. They concentrate mana and hope that it will naturally flow through their body without having to restrict and control it. The mana of the martial arts world is rare, dry but powerful, while the mana of this world is full of pressure and gentleness, allowing it to leave the body more easily. If we have to differentiate, the method that people here use Asura is similar to the martial arts training. Roman also does not need to waste time comparing these two methods, because training helps the body become stronger, but it only helps physically and does not help the practitioner accumulate mana in the body. It's just that if he uses the Asura method of this world, Roman will never reach the peak of his previous life, even if he spends hundreds of years practicing. What? How can you do that? Finally, Chris could not hold back anymore and shouted, "The thing that just came out of you was Asura, right?" Because he was so noisy, Roman just remembered that there was someone else next to him. Chris seemed unable to accept the fact that it took him almost a year to activate Asura, while Roman could do it the first time he was instructed. "Tell me the truth. Are you lying to me? Pretending that you don't know how to use mana?" The more Chris spoke, the louder his voice became, carrying anger and resentment. As he spoke, tears welled up in his eyes, as if he had finally found the reason why he had been so miserably defeated by Roman yesterday. "If it wasn't for you hiding your power, then everything would be too absurd. It took me 10 years to become a 2-star Asura Knight." Facing Chris's indignant question, Roman just laughed. This made him pause for a few seconds, tears flowing even more. Chris's two hands clenched into fists, seemingly ready to fight, because he thought Roman was laughing at his efforts. "Let me ask you this. During the process of you working hard to achieve that goal, have you ever wondered about the method of training you were using?" Roman's sudden question was like a slap straight to Chris's face. What are you trying to say?" Roman suddenly remembered a name when he was still Bak Jung-hyuk. It was the Blood Demon. The Blood Demon was someone who in the past could destroy an entire sect in an instant. Someone who had a huge influence on the martial arts world. In the previous life, Roman and the Blood Demon had gone through a long and intense battle. In the end, the Blood Demon was defeated by Roman, and today, he seemed to see the shadow of the Blood Demon in Chris. Both of them chose to accept humiliation in order to be taught. Chose to throw away the pride in order to become stronger. That was the moment Roman wanted to help Chris become stronger. Speaking of this, Chris seemed to be in a hurry. After all, it was undeniable that he had a strong will to progress. However, Roman was not the type of person who liked to hold someone's hand and point things out for them. He just wanted to remind Chris that sometimes it was not necessary to follow the traditional way that he was taught. "If I had to point things out for you, you would be no different from the way Jonathan had taught you before. However, if you wanted to find out for yourself, then follow me and observe what I did." Chris was surprised, not understanding why the two people's positions had changed so quickly. He was originally sent here to teach the young master to sense mana. And now Chris is the one who has to follow Roman to learn. "For the next 6 months when I join the army, observe how I fight different enemies and become stronger. If after 10 years you still hold on, I'm sure you will find the answer." That was Roman's last words before everyone went home. That night, Chris stayed in his room and thought for a long time. He remembered the first time he met Jonathan, as well as every moment with his master. And Chris suddenly felt that Roman's words made sense. After a sleepless night, he finally made his decision. The next morning, Chris went to Jonathan early to express his wishes. He wanted to go to the battlefield with Roman to become stronger. Jonathan didn't force him to ask him the reason. Because when he looked into Chris's eyes, he knew that he had already made up his mind. Therefore, Jonathan agreed, but he couldn't remind Chris a few words. From now on, he was no longer a part of the Dimitri Knights. But I hope that when he's out there, he will still pursue the goal of protecting his master. Yes, thank you, Chris replied firmly. His eyes were extremely determined. It made Jonathan suddenly feel at ease. It seemed that Chris was no longer the child who cried bitterly because of his mother's death on the battlefield years ago then. Since he had been with Chris for quite a while, Jonathan didn't want his student to suffer any shortages. Therefore, he decided to take him to choose a secret weapon before going into battle. While Roman and Chris were preparing the necessary things to join the army. Then on the streets, Roman's reputation was also gradually spreading throughout the small alleys. The story of Roman personally destroying the Blood Fang gang still made many people skeptical. But the most important thing was that it had reached Kevin's hands. Those who didn't believe it, but Kevin believed it completely. After all, he had seen Roman personally destroy an entire Blood Fang gang with just a dry branch. So he believed that the young master could also wipe out the entire Blood Fang gang with his own hands. Thinking of this, Kevin's tears suddenly flowed. He did that just to keep his promise to me. No, there's no way he would do that for someone like me. But he really did destroy those hooligans. Kevin muttered while secretly wiping away his tears. Kevin, what are you doing? If you want to go home early, then focus on your work. A loud shout made Kevin sober up. Today, he was also forced to work extra to earn money. But after hearing about Roman, Kevin couldn't focus on that job anymore. Because he seemed to have suddenly found his ideal in life. He also wanted to become someone like Roman. Someone who was strong enough to protect those around him when needed. The dangerous people out there weren't just the Blood Fangs. Kevin wanted to become stronger to protect his family. But he didn't know how to become stronger. Kevin kept walking. While walking, he secretly wished that he had the chance to meet young Master Roman again. But it was true that God never disappoints good people. Kevin walked a few more steps and heard someone calling his name. When he raised his head, the person in front of him made him so shocked that he dropped the box of potatoes in his hand. Because the person, it's Roman. Long time no see. Roman took the initiative to greet first. Kevin was extremely confused. It took him a few seconds to think about the current situation. Then he quickly knelt down. Thank you very much. Thanks to that day, my family was able to survive this incident. Indeed, after Roman wiped out the Blood Fang, Kevin's family was able to live peacefully. He also found this casual job with Han's help, which made Kevin even more grateful to Roman. Of course, Roman didn't come today just to ask Han a few simple questions. He wanted to make a deal with Kevin. If he agreed to Roman's request, he wouldn't have to worry about going to the police anymore. He would have a warm tomorrow, food, and even a full life instead of doing these hard jobs. And the premise of that was that Kevin had to follow and serve Roman. If he swore allegiance to him, he wouldn't spare him that. Kevin didn't need to think for long, immediately banging his head down hard. The banging was so hard that it made his forehead bleed. But Kevin didn't care. I swear to be loyal to the young master. If you want me to die, I will die according to your orders. And if you ask me to kill, I will kill no matter who it is. As long as you protect my family, my life will be in your hands. Kevin's blood oath reminded Roman of another madman. He had also only received orders from one person. As long as that person gave the order, he was ready to fight against an army of hundreds of people. And he would never fall until he completed that mission. Roman observed Kevin for a long time. He was sure that this young man would be like that crazy man. Okay, then from now on, you will be my man. Kevin was led to the Dimitri mansion. Hans was in charge of helping him get used to his new life. From the moment this young man entered the mansion, his face was always bright. Perhaps because Roman's wish to become a servant had come true. After handing Kevin over to Hans, Roman went to the library. He searched for every book that contained information about the Asura Knight. The thing that bothered him the most at the moment, most of the books contained similar information about the path of an Asura Knight. The first step to becoming a Night Knight must be able to activate Asura. That is the sign that you have become a 1-star Asura Knight. To become a 2-star Asura Knight, that is, Chris's current level, you must be able to use your Asura to cut hard steel. Just like that, the intensity and power of Asura will determine the Knight's rank. Once you become a 3-star Asura Knight, you will surpass the common understanding and receive special treatment from the kingdom. That is Jonathan's current level. The book also says that currently on the Salamander continent there is a 6-star Asura Knight. And there has never been any anecdote about anyone reaching 7 stars. Among the top 10 greatest knights today, not all have reached the 6-star rank. Reading up to this point, Roman was really curious. He did not know how strong a 6-star Asura Knight could be. When the power of a 2-star Knight stars like Chris are just like ants to him. And even Jonathan, who is currently a 3-star Knight, is only as strong as a 2-star fighter. Roman continued reading the book, which said that those who reach the 6-star level will have abilities that surpass ordinary people. The Asura flame that they can unleash from their blades has a range of up to 10 meters. And their destructive power is also on a completely different level. Currently, only 12 people are said to have reached the 6-star level. They are treated like royalty, regardless of nationality or race, and are known as the 12 Swords of the Continent. Roman's eyes were fixed on the words 12 Swords of the Continent. From all the information he had researched so far, it seemed that they were the strongest. The fact that they could reach this level without knowing how to use mana effectively proved their talent. The book also mentioned mages. Their level is not calculated by stars like knights but by magic spells. Those who have reached the 7th level of magic spells will be given the title of Archmager. These Archmagers are considered demigods. They can walk around the battlefield and disaster lightly waiting for the opportunity to attack. One of their moves can level the ground, cover the sky, and when fighting by numbers, they are even more dangerous than the 6-star Asura Knights. Compared to the Asura Knights, Roman is more interested in mages. Because magic is an ability that does not exist in the martial arts world, it seems that he already knows what he needs to do next. That is to confront these people to understand the situation. However, Roman does not have a specific direction for the future. He cannot predict what will happen, which makes the situation even more dangerous. However, for even so, Roman didn't want to stay in one place. He wanted to gain experience to ensure that he could live a successful life in this life. And so, Roman quickly outlined his plans. First, he asked Hans to find him a suitable place to train. And he took Roman to the workshop that Romero used to use. After becoming a noble, Romero strictly forbade outsiders from entering this place, so Roman could spend the next week training here without anyone noticing. Food and drink, I don't need them. However, you are not allowed to let anyone in here. Remember, unless my people are in danger of dying. Otherwise, no one is allowed to come near me. It was just a few simple instructions. But Hans felt an extremely terrifying pressure coming from his young master. After that, he entered the workshop and closed the door. It seemed that Hans had spread straw on the floor to make the floor warmer. Although Roman appreciated his attention, although I appreciate the thought, it'll only make the flow of chi more erratic. He tidied up the straw, then sat down on the floor in a meditation posture. Up until now, Roman had only been able to evoke a little mana, in order to use arts with the heavenly demon god art as the base perfectly. He was forced to start over from the first steps. That is, to remove all impurities in this body. Roman practiced intermediate high, start to circulate the energy. Not long after, blood started to flow. The feeling must not be pleasant at all. But Roman can still endure. Because he feels, the mana that should be flowing inside Roman's body is being stopped. This body has more impurities than other ordinary young men. But because he had long guessed that this would happen, he was mentally prepared. Because Roman has decided to live a serious life in this world. So he must regain the power from his previous life to protect what he has. And this is only the first step. A week later, Lord Lawrence brought his daughter Flora to the Dimitri mansion. He was eager to meet his future son-in-law, but the servant only informed him that the young master was busy. Lawrence sighed uncomfortably and sat down. As expected, they did not want us to come here. Looks like we have no choice but to wait. Wait, sit down. With her father's permission, Flora sat down beside her. Lawrence couldn't help but remind his daughter to be careful with her words. Because they came here today to apologize for the mistakes they had made. Flora's complexion today was not good at all. In fact, it had not been good since the day before, when her father found out that his beloved daughter had arbitrarily asked to cancel the engagement with Roman. Although Flora tried to calmly explain everything, she still couldn't stop her father from flying into a rage. It was a waste of time. That I really thought you were a smart child. I really didn't expect you to do something like this. Do you know what's going on in our territory? At that moment, Lord Lawrence felt extremely disappointed in his daughter. He did not want to tell her that the Barco family had shouldered a huge amount of money because he was afraid that even if he told her, she would not understand. But things had come to this point. Lord Lawrence could only make it clear that the Barco family was ready to start a war. And the only way for them to be able to fight against the Barco family was to marry into the wealthy Dmitri family. Yet the daughter he had the most expectations for had messed things up. Our Lawrence family is not weak. Father, without the Dmitri family, we still have a chance. Flora still wants to save the situation. But her father just shook his head in disappointment. It is true that if it were just the Barco family, the Lawrence family would still be able to resist. But the fact that the royal family had accepted their shady orders, and the act of lending money to their family without any demands or collaterals, proved that this was no longer simply a war between two families. Daughter, the people who are giving power to the Barco family are the ones who want our family to collapse. Since they now have a legitimate reason, they will do everything to arrange and manipulate everything. Our territory, our honor, even you, who are considered the flower of the Lawrence family. The cruel truth is laid out before our eyes. Flora had no way to refute it anymore. Actually, she had already known a bit about the current situation of her territory and Lord Lawrence's thoughts when he decided to get married. However, she still decided to put it all aside for her own selfish reasons. While sitting in the carriage with her father to Dimitri's house, Flora forced herself to give up the unrealistic thoughts in her head. Now, even if she refused to marry Roman, she would only lose everything in the future, and that was why the father and son appeared at the Dmitri mansion on the last day of Roman's seclusion. The two of them arrived early in the morning, but when it was time to exorcise the evil spirit, Roman still hadn't come out. Hans was extremely impatient, and Lawrence's father and son seemed dissatisfied. But Hans didn't dare to disobey his young master because he had given him very careful instructions. He kept walking back and forth. Finally, he heard the sound of the door opening. The creaking sound rang out. Hans was overjoyed, but the way he walked out made him jump in surprise. In another development, after waiting for half a day and drinking one cup of tea after another, Lord Lawrence finally couldn't take it anymore. Even though he came here to apologize, having to wait in vain like this made him lose all face. Lord Lawrence tried to clench his fists to calm himself down, but he couldn't stop trembling. The veins on his forehead were also throbbing. After a period of mental struggle, Lord Lawrence stood up and walked straight to Lord Dimitri's study. Roman's father was also busy handling matters. When he heard the footsteps approaching, he didn't even bother to look up. The door to the study was flung open, and Viscount Lawrence rushed in with a fierce attitude like a storm whirlwind. Baron Dmitri, what are you doing keeping your guests waiting for so long? If you are not satisfied with us, then just send us away. I did not expect Lord Dmitri to be so cruel. In response to Viscount Lawrence's questioning, Romero was silent for a few seconds, then calmly dipped his brush into the inkwell. I understand your anger, but did you make an appointment with me before coming here? I know it was wrong for us to come without notice, but we talked about our intention to meet him a week ago. And we had no choice but to come here ourselves because he refused our request and turned silent. It's true that a week ago, Viscount Lawrence sent a letter requesting to meet Roman but received no reply. Because he was so impatient, he had to bring his daughter here without notice. As a result, they had to wait for half a day without any explanation. Lord Lawrence felt terribly insulted and Lord Dmitri should have refused their request to visit from the beginning. Viscount Lawrence's attitude became more and more aggravating. He spoke so harshly that it was as if he had poured cold water on Baron Dimitri's head. Did you come here just to say that you were angry because you had to wait for half a day? After a moment of silence, Romero suddenly asked, and his tone was cold. He made the Lawrence father and son swallow their saliva in tension. Romero was not a fool. On the day Flora visited the Dmitri mansion, Roman took the initiative to propose to him about the annulment. Although he did not ask for the reason, Even a 3-year-old child knew what had happened. Lord Dimitri immediately guessed that Miss Flora was the reason why Roman wanted to annul this arranged marriage. What angered him the most was that the one who took the initiative to arrange this political marriage was Viscount Lawrence. And the one who took the initiative to propose the annulment was also his beloved daughter. This incident was like a slap in the face to Romero. To be more precise, the Dimitri family was the one who received the most severe insult. Yet you, Viscount Lawrence, you still think that your anger is justified just because you have waited for quite a long time. Speaking of this, Romero could no longer hold back his anger. Mr. slamming his hand on the desk, spilling the ink bottle. We didn't want to meet in the first place. And you forgot your own mistake and decided to come to me to complain. The room was silent. Flora didn't even dare to breathe loudly. And Viscount Lawrence also began to feel that his move was a bit wrong. Since the other party remained silent, Romero continued to speak. He told about how about a month ago, the Barco family contacted him because they wanted to marry the Dimitri family. Just a little after the Lawrence family's marriage proposal, they promised to let the Dimitri family connect with the royal family and give him a portion of the territory after successfully conquering Lawrence. But Romero refused, even though marrying the Barco family would be much more beneficial, for only one reason. That was because the Dimitri family had enough money and strong power to decide according to their own will. And further on, because his son liked the Lawrence family's flower, Miss Flora, Romero decided to confront the Barco family. However, not long after the marriage was arranged, Miss Flora ran over and poured cold water on him by breaking off the engagement with her son. Romero spoke for a while, and Viscount Lawrence began to constantly blame himself, wondering why he lost his temper and made such a big mistake. Lawrence's flower and Dimitri's idiot, Romero said in a self-deprecating tone. It's true that we all know that the two of them are not a good match. But who should remember what Roman's last name means? When the surname Dimitri was added after the name Roman, its value changed. Romero's words were not filled with indignation, but he was not wrong at all. Moreover, the people who truly desired this wise man were not the Dimitri family, but in fact, Viscount Lawrence and his family. Faced with Lord Dimitri's harshness, Flora could only keep silent and bow her head low. Suddenly, she remembered her days when she was still in the academy. That was where the children of noble families came to study and build relationships. Back then, there was a family so small that their value was questioned by everyone, which made Flora pay a lot of attention to it. That's Joel's child. In this world where children think they are born treasures, Joel's son is the exception. One day, he made a small mistake. If it were other famous noble children, it would be fine, but because he was young Master Joel, the academy opened a disciplinary committee for him. When Flora saw the teachers scolding Joel for his small mistake, a man who seemed to be his father appeared and apologized. He bowed his head deeply, asked for their forgiveness and promised to teach his son again. The other children secretly laughed at Joel's father and son through the glass door. Only Flora felt that they were pitiful. Many years passed. Now she and Count Lawrence were in the same situation as Joel was back then. This ironic situation made Flora feel ridiculous. Her father next to her was getting more and more bowed his head lower and lower to apologize to Baron Dimitri. Flora felt that young Master Joel was very weak back then, and now her family was the same. All this time, Flora had been silent, but just as she opened her mouth to speak up for her father, the door behind her opened. The servant announced that young Master Roman had arrived, and his new appearance made Flora gasp in surprise. After a week of training, Roman seemed to have grown quite tall. His brown hair had also turned silver purple and his eyes had turned dark purple. He was a bit colder, but he was admittedly much more handsome. I came to see you, father. Have you finished training? Even Baron Dimitri was shocked by his son's drastic change. But the fact that he looked like he had a successful plastic surgery was not as important as the matter at hand. Romero wanted his son to personally participate in the discussion of the marriage. Since Roman had changed, he was willing to listen to his decision as a father, as well as the head of the Dimitri family. I understand what you mean, father, Roman replied indifferently, then glanced at Flora, making her extremely nervous. Roman had lived a lifetime. He was smart enough to understand what the connection between the two families would lead to. In the situation where the Barco family was threatening the Lawrence territory, the power of the Dimitri family would guarantee Lawrence a way to live. When Roman said this, Romero thought that his son had changed his mind and wanted to continue this marriage. But Roman still kept a cold attitude as usual. He took out a delicate handkerchief, wiped the ink bottle spilled on the table because of his father's banging on the table just now, and said, "On the first day I met Flora Lawrence, my intention about this marriage changed. Father and son must have heard the rumors about Dimitri's idiot, and she must have thought that she could not marry such a person." Roman's words were very calm, but it was like a knife piercing Flora's last bit of calm. His stance was also very firm, that no matter how others judged Roman Dimitri, he hoped to live a life with that person who only judged him after direct contact. Flora could not do that, so Roman still wanted to end this unwanted marriage. As soon as Roman finished speaking, the entire room seemed to be engulfed in a gloomy atmosphere. The most desperate person at this moment was Viscount Lawrence, because that arranged marriage was the last chess piece for him to save his family. But his daughter had offended the Dimitri family, and perhaps no family would accept to be in-laws with Lawrence anymore. His family would have to confront the Barco family and the forces behind it with the poor resources they had. This battle was originally quite even, but if the Dimitri family cooperated with the Barco family, Lawrence would only have to eat bran. To prevent that from happening, Viscount Lawrence decided to endure it to the end, bowing 90 degrees to say his final apology. He wanted to use some money to make up for the mistake his daughter had made. But with a rich iron source owner like Romero, he absolutely did not want that little bit of money. But Romero also understood what Viscount Lawrence wanted to use the compensation money for himself. There was no need for him to do so. As the head of the Dimitri family, I will not mention your choice when discussing future issues. We will announce to the public that Flora Lawrence has broken off the engagement for personal reasons. And if we do so, we will no longer have any reason to cooperate with the Barco family." Viscount Lawrence let out a sigh of relief. After thanking Romero, the father and son also left. Before leaving the study, Viscount Lawrence still could not help but glance at his son-in-law. If he had known that he was so valuable, he would have been more careful in instructing Flora to preserve this marriage. Although he knew that he had made a serious mistake, Lawrence could not save the situation now. Waiting until the study door closed after a while, Baron Dimitri had time to express his confusion. He wanted to know what had happened to his son during the past week and why he had returned to this state. Indeed, it would be strange if others saw Roman's appearance and weren't shocked. For the entire week, he stayed in the warehouse and trained his body by removing all the impurities inside to enter the mortal state. In the mortal state, there were steps needed to prepare the body to become a celestial demon mage. Although it wasn't considered impressive in the martial arts world, but with the absolute energy that existed naturally in this world, the amount of impurities in Roman's body was very important. Even preparing the foundation for this body had a very significant effect. The changes in Roman's appearance were the clearest evidence that he was completely different from before. But it was a bit difficult to explain these things to Romero. Roman then pretended that he couldn't remember all the details of the training process. But he believed that the energy that had begun to spread throughout his body. Romero was even more surprised, saying that the energy always transmitted was a phenomenon of circulating energy from nature in the body to enhance physical capacity. And it only happened to a few people. Yet Roman, who was always called the idiot of Dimitri's house, could do it. His development began to surpass Romero's understanding, making him a little skeptical. But even so, he could not change the fact that Roman was his son. "So I can only continue to trust and support you. Never forget the fact that your name is Roman Dimitri. And I am Romero Dimitri, your father. I will definitely help you with everything you need." Originally, those were just very normal words. But they moved Roman deeply. Because in the previous scene, his father was a cold and domineering person. Now, Romero protected and supported Roman unconditionally. This feeling was really not bad at all. After chatting with his father, Roman left the study. Unexpectedly, Flora was still waiting outside. Her appearance seemed hesitant, but Miss Lawrence did not stay to insist on the marriage anymore. She just wanted to send a belated apology to Roman for hastily judging him and causing trouble for both families. Roman from beginning to end had no feelings for this young lady, this beautiful letter. And he also had no intention of continuing that marriage, so there was no need for that apology. But Flora still continued to chase and explain the reason why she unilaterally wanted to cancel the engagement. during the social gathering held by the noble families of the Northeast. Flora heard about the rumor that she was going to be engaged to a member of the Dimitri family. It would not be worth mentioning if that rumor did not spread quickly and become negative. She could accept marrying a useless playboy. But the most important thing was that in those rumors, people mentioned that young Master Roman was a drug addict, and Flora felt that she could not live with that person for the rest of her life. When she said these things, Roman's expression was still extremely cold, because no matter what the reason was, it could not change the current relationship between the two. After that, Roman coldly left, but the result, in fact, what Flora said at that time also made him concerned. Drugs are something that corrodes both the physical and mental aspects of a person. Roman Dimitri originally possessed a body as soft as noodles, which was quite understandable if he was really an addict. But since he crossed over to this world, Roman had not felt any drugs circulating in his body, although he had indeed shown signs of using drugs to end his life. The amount of drugs had completely left his body after he completed the refining process in that week. After thinking on his own for a long time without any results, Roman directly asked Hans about his concerns. "Hey, have you ever seen me use drugs or had any situations made you suspect that I used drugs?" Hans was startled by the young master's sudden question. Roman affirmed that he was not joking. Of course he could not say that he was a time traveler and wanted to learn about the past of this body's owner. So Roman made an excuse that he was looking back at his actions from the past. From the objective perspective of outsiders, Hans did not understand why the young master changed his mind so quickly. But if he thought about it carefully, even though he had never witnessed it with his own eyes, there was indeed a period of time when Hans felt that Roman's actions were quite strange. It happened about a month ago, when Roman had just returned from a social party. At that time, his state was very strange, looking both guilty and scared. After that, Roman seemed to have lost all desire to live and stayed in his room. Every night, he asked Hans to bring a large amount of alcohol. This made Hans really doubt whether the young master was using drugs or not. Roman listened very attentively, plus what Flora said earlier. He also gradually became doubtful. "Hans, do you know who was the host of that party?" "As the eldest son of the Barco family." "Young master, his name is Anthony Barco." This makes it even more suspicious. Roman was originally arranged to be married to Flora Lawrence, and after attending a social party hosted by the Barco family, his mental state changed suddenly. In the end he chose to end his life. The reason why Roman ended his life kept bothering back Jung Hyuk's mind. In the will he left behind, the only thing mentioned was that Roman was afraid of going to the battlefield. But at that time, he was already engaged to Flora, and in fact, there were quite a few ways for nobles to avoid going to the battlefield when they were married. So Roman really chose to end his life just because he was afraid of battle. This is too unreasonable. "Hans, I think Anthony Barco and I were very close?" Roman continued to ask. Hans shook his head. The two of them were not close. But since Roman got engaged to Flora, Anthony seemed to pay more attention to him. This was understandable, because the political marriage between the Dimitri and Lawrence families was a big problem for the Barco family, who were looking to control the Lawrence territory. And the easiest way to solve that problem was to destroy this marriage. Perhaps they had done everything they could to Roman and that led to his suicide. Speaking of this, Hans suddenly remembered another thing. A few days ago, the Barco family had sent a party invitation here. As it coincided with the time Roman was in seclusion, he didn't know what to do with it. Roman also had to admire the shamelessness of this family's members. Having already failed to destroy the enemy once, he still wanted to continue to attack. Chong. Fortunately, Roman was the type of person who was never afraid of anyone. This party would be held in 2 weeks, and he asked Hans to quickly send a reply to the Barco family that he would definitely attend. The next morning, Hans brought Kevin to meet Roman, and did not forget to remind him not to be too surprised when he saw the young master's new appearance. But when he saw him with his own eyes, Kevin was still shocked for a few seconds. Not only did his appearance look different, but Roman's aura had also increased by a level, making Kevin unable to help but admire. "How have you been recently?" Seeing Kevin coming, Roman stopped practicing his sword and took the initiative to speak first. "Ah yes, young master, I'm used to everything here." Kevin seemed nervous when he said this. "But I always ask myself what role I've been here all this time. I'm not sure if I have anything I can do for you anymore.